Whenever somebody says that I'm not able to hear, there are tests to prove it, whether really he is not hearing or he is able to hear. But otherwise, on the history, if somebody is telling I'm not able to hear, then we have to believe that. So they can be a malingerer. So because to get some benefit out of that, they pretend that they are not able to hear. That is, they are called as malingerers. So tuning for test, history, clinical examination, specific audiological tests, audiometries are there which can differentiate the malingerers from the true people who have a genuine hearing loss. It can be psychogenic also. This only psychological, they feel that I'm not able to hear. This is called as a non-organic hearing loss. So we will see etiological factors of organic hearing loss. Right? So if we start from outer ear, that is external auditory canal, we have seen that in the causes in the external ear and middle ear, they are responsible for the conductive hearing loss. So the causes can be simply excessive amount of wax collection that may lead to the keratosis obturans, otitis externa, exostosis, foreign bodies impacted, long-standing foreign bodies, or otomycosis, that is fungal infection. These all can be the reasons for hearing loss due to the causes in the external auditory canal. These all diseases we have seen in detail when we were discussing about the individual diseases of the external canal. We need not to go into the details of this, but we will just to complete the topic, we will just enumerate the causes, important causes from these all, the outer ear and middle ear, and we will discuss in depth some other important aspects of hearing loss which were not dealt previously in the other topics like otitis, disease of external ear, or CSOM, ASOM. Causes in the middle ear include effusion, that is serous otitis media or secretory otitis media, or glue ear. Whenever there is a glue-like consistency, sterile fluid, this is not infective, sterile, there are no bacteria, sterile fluid gets collected behind the tympanic membrane. One more very important condition to remember, because it is common in children, because eustachian tube problems are common in children, right? So very important, effusion. See what happens if the person has a CSOM, he presents with otorrhea. Main complaint is otorrhea. That is very obvious. People seek immediate treatment, and it is easy for us also to recognize the disease. Whenever there is a discharge, we obviously do the otoscopic examination or microscopic examination, and we finalize the diagnosis. If the patient has a central perforation, we call it as a safe or tubotympanic type of otitis media. Or if the patient has a retraction pocket and cholesteatoma, then we classify them as an unsafe type of otitis media. But the problem is when the patient comes with a complaint of diminished hearing and there is no discharge, then we have to be careful in coming to the diagnosis. We have to very meticulously do the clinical examination and necessary investigation to finalize the diagnosis. One more thing, effusion, it is very easily missed because the collection of fluid is behind the intact tympanic membrane and there are no other complaints. There is no earache, there is no ear discharge. Only these people complain of sense of fullness in the ear and deafness. That too, it's okay whenever it happens in an adult who can recognize, or we can immediately point out that something is wrong in my ear and I am having fullness sensation and I am not able to hear properly. But a child, small child, you won't be able to tell exactly that he is not able to hear properly, or there is a heaviness in the ear. If there is a pain, definitely the child will cry, he will point to the ear, he will tell. But only heaviness and mild to moderate diminished hearing, the child is not able to recognize. But the problem is, because of that diminished hearing, they start falling Their performance starts falling low in the schools. They are not attentive. They don't understand what teachers are telling. Their scholastic performance is their performance deteriorates, and the all problems they start only because we are not able to recognize or identify that the child has a hearing loss. Why these problems of effusion or collection of sterile fluids are more common in children? Because of problems of eustachian tube related diseases. Again, in children, tonsillitis, adenoiditis, sinusitis is more common. Because of that, the eustachian tube easily gets blocked. That leads to the negative middle ear pressure. That leads to the that collection of sterile fluid in the middle ear. So, otoscopic examination or microscopic examination can give us a hint that there is a fluid collected behind the tympanic membrane. Sometimes we can see air fluid levels or air bubbles behind the tympanic membrane. The tympanic membranes appear very dull. Then we have to suspect that probably there is a collected fluid behind the tympanic membrane. And then we have to subject these patients for myringotomy and grommet insertion. Myringotomy is to drain the fluid with whatever sterile fluid has collected. And what does the grommet do? It keeps that whatever incision we have done for myringotomy patent for enough period of time so that all the fluid gets drained out. That is the treatment of effusion. So tympanometry is the variety of audiometry that helps us in the diagnosis of effusion or glue ear. So important from this is rather than from traumatic perforations, cholesteatoma or routine perforation, central perforation of CSOM, what is the most important entity is effusion or glue ear. You may get a question, full question also, or a short note, very important topic because it is very common. Then causes in the inner ear. So whenever we talk of inner ear, obviously it is about sensorineural or mixed hearing loss only. Most common variety is idiopathic. Many of the times we are not able to finalize the cause why exactly the person has developed the sensorineural hearing loss. It can be infective like labyrinthitis, vestibular neuronitis. Right? It can be traumatic. Head injuries, severe head injuries can lead to the fracture going through the labyrinth, and that can disrupt the basilar membrane, and that can lead to the sensorineural hearing loss. It can be tumors, CP angle tumors like acoustic neuroma. They can lead to the sensorineural hearing loss. Now, how to evaluate these patients coming with a hearing loss? The most important thing is onset. When exactly the hearing loss started? Is it a sudden onset or is it a gradual? And in progression, what we would like to understand is whether it is stable or it is deteriorating. That is very important history. People coming with a history of sudden onset hearing loss in adult or elderly person, it can be a sudden sensorineural hearing loss. They will say that I was fine till day before yesterday, but yesterday I got up in the morning and I feel that I'm not able to hear from my right side. Some phone call came in. I picked up a mobile and I started hearing from the right ear, as I have a habit of hearing through the right ear. But I came to know that I'm not able to hear only. When I shifted the cell phone to the left ear, I was hearing properly. So this is how these people learn. That is a sudden onset hearing loss. Most commonly it is of sensorineural origin. Or if the patient says that I met a road traffic accident and after that I am feeling that I am not able to hear properly, it is also a sudden onset hearing loss. Gradual onset is people will say that I started having ear discharge since last 2 years. That is intermittent. In between it stops when I do take medications. After again it starts. The hearing loss started that time only, but now that time I was able to hear normal conversation. I was having problem only in hearing the loud sounds. But now after 2 years of repeated episodes of ear discharge, at present I am not able to hear even a normal conversation also. That is a progressive hearing loss. What the progressive hearing loss indicates that there is some disease in the ear which is increasing or that is progressing, and that is leading to the destruction of the structures. Probably that is leading to the progressive hearing loss. Then the age of onset. If parents say that this child is not able to hear since birth only, so that is probably a congenital type of cause for the hearing loss. If they say that it started in childhood with a ear discharge, probably it is ASOM and later on converting into the CSOM. If age of onset is in elderly person like 75 or 80, that is probably a presbyocusis, age-related hearing loss. So this is how the age of onset helps us in coming to the diagnosis of what exactly is the cause. And the unilateral or bilateral, we know some diseases which presents with a bilateral asymmetrical hearing loss. Probably one of the example is otosclerosis or otospongiosis, where there is a progressive fixation of stapes footplate of one side followed by the other side. Then we are dealing when the history is like bilateral. At present, I am not able to hear from both ears, but it all started 4-5 years back, and it is slowly deteriorating. I was having problem to hear from the right side only in the beginning, but since last 2 years, I am not able to hear from the left side also. So that is a bilateral hearing loss. So bilateral hearing loss indicates the diseases like otosclerosis, bilateral CSOM, bilateral sensorineural hearing loss. And the present status of hearing, that is also very important. So how we take the history of present status of hearing, what we ask them, hearing loss means what exactly? How? So arbitrarily, if somebody is not able to hear the only whispered sounds, but they can hear a normal conversation or loud sounds, then we classify as them as having a mild hearing loss. If somebody is not able to hear soft sounds or as well as a normal conversation, but they can hear the loud sounds, then probably the person is having moderate hearing loss. And if somebody is not able to hear even a loud sound, then he is suffering from severe hearing loss, right? This is how we arbitrarily judge the severity of the hearing loss. Then comes the family history. Some diseases again like a congenital hearing loss or otosclerosis, they run in families. And if patients tell the history that my parents, my grandparents were also suffering from early onsets of bilateral hearing loss, that can give us a hint that probably we are dealing with something like disease like a otosclerosis. History of noise exposure, again very important. We know that it damages the hair cells and that can lead to the deafness. So we are going to see a bit of detail about noise exposure in noise-induced hearing loss in coming slides. Right. Medications like aminoglycosides, diuretics, they are potential ototoxic, and that history also has to be taken if your patient is on long-term medication on any of these diseases. Then the other features like otalgia, otorrhea, vertigo, tinnitus, oral fullness, neurological deficit, all that has to be taken in detail so that will add to our diagnosis or to rule out some definite things. Then after this taking the detailed history, what first we have to do is clinical examination. That clinical examination includes first examination with the otoscope, then ear microscopy. Otoscope only gives maximum double magnification, twice magnification. We may not be able to examine clearly each and every corner of the tympanic membrane with otoscope. We are likely to miss something. And if there is a wax, if there is a discharge, or if the canal is very narrow or tortuous, if there are excessive hairs in the external canal, we cannot see all the details of the external canal and tympanic membrane with otoscope. So All these patients must undergo ear microscopy also. Under the microscope, we can give 2 times, 4 times, 6 times magnification. Our both hands are free. We can do cleaning of the ear by suction, that is called as oral toilet, or we can remove the wax with a wire vectis or wax hook. We can remove the fungus, we can remove the foreign body if it is present, and we can do the detailed examination of tympanic membrane, which is of paramount importance. Sometimes if the patient has got a small retraction pocket in the apic or posterior superior region, probably we miss on the otoscopic examination. That can be a blunder to miss the unsafe type of otitis media. But that can be definitely picked up under microscope. So every patient must undergo a microscopic examination also after otoscopy, so that we do not miss anything. We have to do all the tuning fork test meticulously and properly, Rinne test, Weber test, as well as the absolute bone conduction test. And after that, we have to do the audiometry. Then we have to rely more, or we have to depend more on tuning fork test, because we are doing it on ourselves, right? Audiometry is done by technician or audiologist. Definitely, they also do it meticulously, but that has to be correlated with our tuning fork test finding. It cannot happen that our tuning fork tests are something different and their audiometry findings are something different. Then again, we have to reassess our tuning fork tests and audiometry. Both should match. So why audiometry is to be done? One important thing is we get a documented evidence of status of the hearing. And we also come to know the type of hearing loss, whether it is conductive, sensorineural or mixed, and also the degree of hearing loss, mild, moderate or severe. For these reasons, we have to do audiometry in all patients. Sometimes what happens, we post the patient for surgery, say a tympanoplasty or mastectomy, and patient's hearing is better preoperatively, but during surgery we found that the ossicles are damaged, or the cholesteatoma sac or those flakes, they are going under the ossicular chain. So the first importance is to make the ear safe and dry. So we have to remove all the cholesteatoma. We cannot leave any cholesteatoma behind. So in the exercise of removing the cholesteatoma, we have to remove the incus sometimes to clear the cholesteatoma. What is the aim? To clear the cholesteatoma. But in that business, what can happen? Patient's hearing may deteriorate. Patient will say that before surgery I was hearing better, but after surgery my hearing has gone down. So for that sake, we have to have a documentation of hearing that can be done to the audiometry. That is the importance of audiometry. And as we have discussed, if the tympanic membrane is normal, if the external canal is normal, and still the patient is having conductive hearing loss, then what is the cause? Probably something is wrong in the middle ear. Probably something is wrong with the ossicular chain. Probably the ossicular chain is not in continuity, or the ossicular chain is fixed, it is not moving, or there is a fluid collection, sterile fluid collection, whatever we see in a effusion. So to differentiate the causes of middle ear leading to the conductive hearing loss, whether it is ossicular chain fixity, or whether it is ossicular chain discontinuity, or whether it is a fluid collection in the middle ear behind the intact tympanic membrane, we have to do a tympanometry test. Tympanometry test can tell us approximately if the patient has got any problem in the ossicles, like fixation or discontinuity, or is there enough fluid collection. So tympanometry is very important when we are dealing with a patient with a conductive hearing loss behind intact tympanic membrane. If the patient has got perforation, our diagnosis is obvious. The person is having hearing loss because of perforation, conductive hearing loss. But the question comes when the external canal is normal, there is no wax, there is no fungus, there is no foreign body, and the tympanic membrane is also normal, and still the patient has a conductive hearing loss. Then what is the cause? Tympanic membrane is intact. We cannot see through the intact tympanic membrane the condition of ossicular chain, whether the ossicles are in discontinuity, whether they are mobile or not, or whether there is a ossicular chain fixation or there is a fluid collection. Unfortunately, we are not able to see through the intact tympanic membrane. Then what can help us? Tympanometry. That can tell us whether there is something is wrong in the ossicular chain or there is anything wrong in the middle ear cleft. So this is how we go for the assessment when we are dealing with a conductive hearing loss. So audiometry is a very important investigation. So frequencies what we test is 250 to 8000 hertz, and in a logarithmic scale, when the hearing loss is between 0 to 20 decibels, we take it as a mild hearing loss. When the hearing loss is between 20 to 40 decibels, we take it as a 0 to 20 is normal hearing. When the graph is between 20 to 40, we call it as a mild hearing loss. When it is between 40 to 60, it is moderate. And when it is more than 60 decibels, then we define it as a severe hearing loss, right? So this is one of the example of a tympanogram, audiogram, right? This is audiogram. So this is a bone conduction. So bone conduction thresholds are up to 20 decibels, right? So that's why the bone conduction is normal. But what has happened? The air conduction is reduced, right? That means we have to increase the intensity of stimulus for the air conduction up to 50 decibels. Here up to 40 decibels, again up to 50 decibels. So 40 to 60 is moderate hearing loss. So this patient is having conductive hearing loss because his bone conduction is normal and only air conduction is reduced, right? That's why it is conductive hearing loss. And why moderate? Because it is up to the extent of 40 to 60 decibels, right? So as we will just see the outline of treatment of conductive hearing loss. If it is wax, it is foreign body or mild otitis externa, even a non-ENT person can treat wax. Obviously, we know there are wax solvents available. If we give the wax solvents in the form of ear drops, the wax swells up and it can come out on its own. Or after giving a wax solvents, you can do a ear syringing and you can remove the wax, right? Foreign bodies obviously can be removed either with a syringing, but which is not advised in hygroscopic foreign bodies, or it can be removed with the help of forceps. That to the foreign bodies which are outside. If foreign bodies are too much deep in the exnotic canal, they are difficult to remove. These patients need to be referred to the ENT specialist. Mild otitis now obvious needs antibiotics and anti-inflammatory drugs, and that can resolve. And we have to advise the patient not to handle the ear. Many of the times the cause for external otitis is patients have a habit of handling the exnotic canal. They try to clean it with a matchstick or with a earbuds or with some metal things. So that can damage the hair follicles and that can lead to the otitis externa. But if the patient, we have a suspicion when the tympanic membrane is normal, when the exnotic canal is normal, or if there is a perforation in the tympanic membrane or a cholesteatoma, then this patient need referral to the ENT specialist. Coming to the sensorineural hearing loss, either it can be bilateral, either it can be unilateral, it can be stable or progressive, or it can be sudden onset sensorineural hearing loss, right? Sudden onset sensorineural hearing loss is a very important entity that needs to be picked up immediately and treated aggressively so that there are some chances that patient may regain his hearing. If we are not able to diagnose the sudden sensorineural hearing loss immediately, and if there is a delay in the treatment, the chances of recovery becomes very less, right? Progressive hearing loss, obviously, it can be because of age-related, that is the most common presbyocusis, or ototoxicity, or because of excessive exposure to the noise. But important is to pick up the sudden sensorineural hearing loss. So when we suspect a sudden hearing loss, when the rapid onset over 3 days period only, the patient will say that I was fine before 3 days, but suddenly since last 3 days what I am feeling is, it's not a, it can be 1 day also, it can be 2 days, but definitely within 3 days. And will say that since last 3 days I am feeling I am not able to hear only, then probably we are dealing with a sudden hearing loss. So history is within 3 days, right? So your turn audiometry we have to immediately do to find out whether it is conductive or sensorineural, and if it is sensorineural, then definitely it is a sudden sensorineural hearing loss. So that 30 dB or more hearing loss has to be present on pure tone audiometry in 3 consecutive frequencies like 500, 1000, 2000 or 1000, 2000 and 4000 hertz. Like in these 3 frequencies, if there is more than 30 decibel hearing loss and the history is of less than 3 days, then probably we are dealing with sudden sensorineural hearing loss. And what is idiopathic sudden sensorineural hearing loss? Probably there is no any identifiable cause. What can be the cause? Sudden severe exposure to the loud sounds like blasts or like Dolby sound. These people can develop a sudden sensorineural hearing loss. But here probably we know the etiology. But some people will say that no, there is I don't have a history of any exposure to loud sounds or blast or any injury or any accidental injury, nothing. But suddenly I am not able to hear. That means it is idiopathic. There is no identifiable cause for the hearing loss. So progressive, as I told, most common is presbyocusis or some tumors like acoustic neuroma. As they increase in size, probably they will lead to the more and more amount of hearing loss. Ototoxic drugs like aminoglycoside, furosemide, they are more harmful when the patients are elderly and those who have other renal diseases. Or sometimes it is autoimmune, but it is progressive. This type of hearing loss is progressive. So this is how the audiogram we will see. In the low frequencies, the hearing may be normal, but as we go towards the higher frequencies, the hearing loss is deteriorating, right? So this is a typical picture of presbyocusis. More hearing loss in higher frequencies. The lower frequencies, they are affected later on. In the beginning, higher frequencies are affected and it is progressive. The other causes of unilateral hearing loss, what we have seen are Meniere's disease, that is a symptom complex of vertigo, tinnitus, aural illness, and hearing loss, and some unilateral acoustic neuromas. They also present with other symptoms like unsteadiness, other cranial nerve involvements, and tinnitus. These are some important causes of unilateral progressive sensorineural hearing loss. Then again coming back to the important aspect, that is sudden sensorineural hearing loss, majority are idiopathic. That means there is no any known cause. And in some cases we have a history of some accidental injuries like road traffic accidents or blast injury, or people have a history of viral infections like herpes simplex or herpes zoster virus. That is again they are common causes of sudden hearing loss. Right? And arterial infarct in the inferior cerebral artery or vertebrobasilar territories. So there is clot in these blood vessels and the blood supply to the regions supplied by these arteries is blocked. That can lead to the infarct in the area because of lack of blood supply. Some diseases like syphilis, syphilis is not common nowadays. That's why it is called as rarely. Syphilis can also lead to the sudden sensorineural hearing loss. Treatment, as I told, If we pick up the sudden sensorineural hearing loss at the earliest, the person coming with history of severe hearing loss, within a 3 days, we do the audiometry and it shows the more than 30 decibel hearing loss in consecutive 3 frequencies. We are dealing with a case of sudden sensorineural hearing loss. They needs to be treated aggressively. As we know, in many of the cases, it is idiopathic. There is no definite cause for sudden sensorineural hearing loss. Then we take it, probably it is and because of viral infection or because of arterial infarct, and then we give a treatment. So first important treatment is prednisolone steroid in high dose 40 to 60 milligram, right, for 1 week, and then taper to 20, then to 10, then to 5 milligram twice a day for next 3 weeks. Steroid relieve the edema as they have a potent anti-inflammatory effect, and probably they can revert the hearing loss to the near normal. So very important, immediately we have to start the steroid, oral steroids in a high dose. Then antivirals like acyclovir, we have to start. Inhalation of carbogen. What is the carbogen? It is a combination of 5% carbon dioxide and 95% oxygen. How it works? It increases the cochlear blood flow and provides better oxygenation. One of the important etiological factor what we have concerned as a cause for sudden hearing loss is blockage in the arteries and lack of blood supply. So carbogen increases the cochlear blood flow and it provides a better oxygenation. Then the low molecular weight dextran, right? So this also decreases the blood viscosity and it can increase the oxygenation and blood flow to the cochlea. Right? So this we have to treat it aggressively, sudden sensory hearing loss. Then only there are some chances that it may come to the normal. Hyperbaric oxygen, right? That also immediately if we start, probably it can help in the reversing the sudden hearing loss. So steroids, hyperbaric oxygen, intratympanic steroids. So oral steroid or intratympanic means what? Inject steroid in the middle ear. So instill rather than inject, what we call instill in the middle ear. So probably that will get absorbed through the oval window and round window, and it helps in reducing the inflammation in the cochlea. That is intratympanic steroid, right? So some people say that there is no role of steroid antivirals, but we give considering as probably viral infection as one of the etiological factor. And if it doesn't improve with this much of aggressive treatment, rehabilitation in the form of hearing aid, right? So now suppose the person has got the sudden sensorineural hearing loss or a progressive gradual sensorineural hearing loss. If it is a sudden sensorineural, we have seen the treatment. So some of the patients, they come back to the normal hearing with the heavy dose of oral or intratympanic steroids, carbogen therapy or hyperbaric oxygen, and some neurotonics and all that. But those patients who do not recover or people with a gradual progressive sensorineural hearing loss like presbyacusis, then there is no alternative than to give some amplification devices. No other drug or there is no other surgery which can make these people's hearing normal. So amplification either by different types of hearing aids are there, body worn or pocket type of hearing aid, right? So receiver is kept in the pocket and through the wire the vibrations are carried through the external canal and to the ear plug. There are some other behind the ear hearing aid or in the ear, small tiny hearing aids are available. They can be just inserted into the external canal. They can fit there. So there is no wire, there is no external apparatus. It can simply fit in the ear. It is not visible also, cosmetically acceptable. No one will come to know that you are wearing a hearing aid, right? So these are different types of hearing aid, or there are some other options like bone anchored hearing aid. And those patients who do not benefit with the high end of hearing aids for a trial of 6 months or 1 year, then we may advise with a cochlear implant. Even in a deaf child who has a congenital hearing loss, which is not getting benefited with the hearing aid, then we have to advise cochlear implant. So what cochlear implant does? It has got external apparatus. It receives the sound waves. It converts into the electrical stimuli. Those electrical stimuli are directly transmitted through the electrode array into the cochlea, and it directly stimulates the cochlear nerve. So all cochlear apparatus, what is the function of cochlea? Converting the mechanical vibrations into the electrical energy, electrical impulse through the vibration of through the movement of hair cells. So whenever there is no movement of hair cells or the hair cells are damaged, cochlea is not able to convert the mechanical energy to electrical energy, then this cochlear implant will help. This implant will take over the function of cochlea. What is the function of cochlea? Converting mechanical energy into electrical energy, right? So this cochlear implant, simply it has got a receiver which is inserted behind the ear under the skin, and the electrode arrays, they are inserted into the cochlea, which can directly stimulate the cochlear nerve. So function of the cochlea is taken over by the cochlear implant. Function of cochlea is to convert the mechanical vibrations into electrical impulses. So that is the final option for the elderly people with a severe sensorineural hearing loss who are not getting benefited with a hearing aid, or a child with a congenital profound hearing loss who is not getting benefited with the use of hearing aid. The only option remains is the cochlear implant, right? But very expensive procedure. Implant itself may cost 6 to 7 lakh. The surgical cost is, again, the surgical cost, hospitalization and everything may cost a lakh of rupees. And later on, there is a extensive rehabilitation or training program. It is not that we have put that cochlear implant and suddenly the next day the child starts hearing dramatically. It won't happen. There have to be extensive training sessions to the child. The child becomes dependent on the audiologist and audiological team for the training for long period of time. So every day, every week, every month, they need to be trained how to, with the utilization of the electrical stimulus, how to learn the art of listening and speaking. So there is an extensive contribution from the audiological team also for a long period of time, right? Then coming to the some more details of ototoxic drugs, aminoglycosides, what they do, they destroy the type 1 hair cells of the crista and the destruction of outer hair cells also. Vancomycin, it acts by damaging to the cochlear hair cells, initially in the basal terms. Loop diuretics, they lead to the edema and cystic changes in the stria vascularis, which is responsible for production of endolymph. Salicylates, they create vasoconstriction. Chloroquine and quinine, they damage the cochlea and stria vascularis. Cytotoxic drugs affect the outer hair cells, right? So this is the mechanism of action of ototoxic drugs, how they affect the hearing. Then important aspect is noise induced hearing loss, right? So frequencies, the noise of 2000 to 3000 hertz frequencies causes more sensorineural hearing loss than lower or higher frequencies, right? Remember, this is very important. Which frequencies are responsible for more hearing loss? 2000 to 3000. Intensity and duration. As the intensity of noise increases, the permissible time for exposure is reduced. The 5 decibel rule, what it says? Any rise of 5 decibel in the noise level will reduce the permitted noise exposure to half, right? So in next slide we will see how much is the permissible time exposure to particular intensity of the sound. Continuous or intercontinuous noise is more harmful than the interrupted sound, right? Then this is a permitted sound exposure hours. Very important slide. If we are working in the noise level where it is around 90 decibels, probably permitted hours are 8, 95 4 hours. If it is 110 decibel noise intensity, we are working in that area, probably only 30 minutes. See, so if we work for more than this permissible time limits, probably there are more chances of developing noise-induced sensory neural hearing loss, right? So this is how the typical audiogram of noise-induced hearing loss we will see. There will be dip at the 4000 hertz, right? And it is a sensory neural type of hearing loss. So a typical notch as 4000 hertz is seen in both air and bone conduction, usually in both ears, right? And high-pitched tinnitus is there. And in later stages, the other frequencies also are involved. So how to prevent this noise-induced hearing loss? Person who is working in the factories with noise about 85 decibels should have following precautions. Pre-employment and then annually hearing levels are to be checked by audiometry. If there is any doubt that probably the person is deteriorating hearing in the successive audiograms, then his place of working has to be changed, or he is to be told to use earplugs or ear muffs, so which can give a protection up to 35 decibel, right? Or their workplace has to be changed to the areas where there is a less sound exposure. So that is about noise induced hearing loss. The slides are stuck up. Wait for a moment.
Yes, sir. Slide is changed.
Yeah, change. So we have to give some advices to the patients during who are working in a noisy environment that use earplugs or ear muffs. Children nowadays, because of online classes, everybody of us using earphones, right? So we have to limit the sound to the optimum, right? And hearing aid programming. Ototoxic drugs are to be avoided, specifically elderly people, those with a renal disease, right? And one more very important advice: if somebody unfortunately has developed severe profound hearing loss in one ear, it is not recoverable, and the other ear is normal, then we have to tell him very cautiously that, see, take care of that other normal ear, right? So otherwise, probably if that ear is also develops hearing loss, then he will be totally deaf, right? So deaf child, we have seen unilateral, bilateral, then we have to immediately pick up the congenitally deaf children, and we have to advise the rehabilitation. So what is rehabilitation? First, give them hearing aid. If they can hear properly with a hearing aid, that's fine. If they are not able to hear properly with a hearing aid, then we have to advise cochlear implantation, right? So this is all about hearing loss, right? So apart from routine normal diseases like ASOM, CSOM, wax, fungus, we have also discussed in more detail about sudden sensory hearing loss and noise-induced hearing loss and ototoxicity, which were not discussed in detail in previous lectures, right? So thank you for patient listening. We will come with a other topic in the next lecture.